Hey, that was fun.
Better than the countdown, Stephen?
Well, we thought we'd shake it up a little bit, right? Who knows? Who knows if it's better? Maybe we'll get comments from our audience. Which lead-in do you like better?
Yeah, definitely. Pop a comment in the chat. Let us know. I think we've lost a lot of viewers. Our number. Oh, there they are. They're back. They thought they're in the wrong place. No, we're at Feuertips. You're in the right place. Good morning,
You're at
Stephen. How are you
Feuertips.
doing today?
And there's so much we can talk about. We could talk about the January 6th hearings in the United States, but maybe we won't. I'm looking forward to getting some criminal prosecutions coming out of it, though. But we do have some big news in the Oracle space, and that is the Cerner acquisition. So I guess Oracle's worked on it for a while. It was just announced or finalized that Cerner is Oracle's spending $28 billion, just a little tiny bit of money, to acquire Cerner, which is big in the healthcare market, which, as you probably know,
in the healthcare market.
Huge. And as you may know, since the COVID environment, since COVID hit, Larry Ellison has in particular been really, really focused on providing resources to help with the pandemic, which we did early on, thanks in many ways to Apex and the Apex team. And just in general, it's clearly a major future direction. So what's I found interesting about this one is it looks like Apex is going to play a critical role in the future direction of Cerner applications. And that's very exciting because it cements the role that Apex will be playing for years and years to come. It was already getting very dominant within Oracle. And it seems like the future direction from Larry and others is anything new is done in Apex. Yep. Wow.
So, Stephen, maybe we're in the right business after all.
In fact, my suggestion is that you recommend to all your friends who may not be using Apex yet, if they're looking for any kind of programming job, learn Oracle Apex, learn Oracle Database enough to get you going in Apex and building websites. There's going to be there already is an intense demand for Apex developers and experienced Apex developers. I think it's just going to keep going straight through the roof. So yes, I would say you're doing your friends a favor if you can get them shifted over to this technology. I tried to do this with a friend of mine who was big in the Microsoft area. And when he looked at Apex, it was probably maybe 5 or 6 back then, Oracle Apex. So not the way it is now, but still a very substantial tool. Anyway, he was kind of like dismissive. No, I like working with real apps and Visual Studio, whatever else. And he'd be very well employed right now, and he's not if he had made that move. So do suggest to your friends, check it out. Rachel mentions that Cerner could use some love. I'm assuming that means that she has some experience with Cerner applications. And yes, I imagine they're all pretty old and clunky and needing some major love. Hopefully they're on Oracle Database. And also we saw the hello from Davel. Davel, hello, thanks for joining us today. Davel is one of 3 volunteers who is working with me to build an application we're calling Rewild Earth, which will allow me to manage volunteers who come to want to help out with our rewilding efforts and invasives removal. So thank you, Davel, for coming today and for helping us out.
As Stephen, you mentioned, learning Apex, that Apex is the place to be. Obviously, anybody, Apex is our business here at Insum. We've built our business on Apex for the last 20 years. We are always looking for talent. So if you have any interest in joining our team, check out our recruitment site.
Recruitee.com.
Recruitee.com.
Yes, let us know.
And we're a fun group to work with, right? You get to work with Stephen, myself.
And I'm a barrel of
80, 90 other people.
All right, so let's laugh our way right into some PL SQL. So obviously these Feuertips can be all over the map in terms of having a specific focus, a new topic, or whatever. So this week, what I wanted to do is take some of what I did the last week with an Insum consultant on a project we're working on, and just kind of explore some refactoring of code, talking about different ways you can write things, drawing on some lessons from other tips, and hopefully you'll just enjoy the little code journey we go on. So why don't you go ahead and share my screen?
Sure.
So one of the things I've been working on here at Insum is building out a new application. We do a lot of new application development for internal use because we have Apex expertise called InTrack, helping us keep our projects on track. This is different from project management software and all the other good stuff. It's literally for the tech team to be able to sit down with each other and see how things are going, and also pull in others like myself to help them assess projects and keep them on track. So obviously the point is not to go into the details of InTrack, but I want to point out a few things. So if I go back to the homepage, we have this idea of milestones. So there were milestones for a project. This is all not all completed code. But anyway, milestones that we move through a project on. And you can have reviews before and after, or just before or just after, and so on. And then you can tie checklists to given moments within the milestone. So before we go to production, we're going to do the pre-production checklist, and so on and so forth. And so there's before and after. Before is preparing for something. After is debriefing from. And you can see that right here. See debriefing from code and unit test. And if I click into in track, we see complete debriefing project, debrief from, prepare for. So there's all this construction of text as sentences. Now, I'm a word person. I write books. I care about language. So I want to get all of this right. I want it to be, grammatically correct. So what we ended up having, and so here's what I want to show you, is the code behind the way we're constructing these strings and how we revamp them. Okay, so off to SQL Developer. We've got our in-track util package. Basically it has almost all the code for in-track in it, just one package. We got a few coming, but in any case, let's look for the hard-coded string quote space for, right? So that's one of those strings that you'll see prepare for, debrief from. So here you go. I'm just constructing this information from my project review types. Let's just show you that metadata for just a moment. So project review types have the name as an action. So preparation for or prepare for, because I use it in different ways, whether it's a before, after, etc. So I take that information, that metadata, and I construct the strings. So prepare, if it's preparation, prepare for, debriefing, debrief from. But now here's the interesting thing. Oh boy, do we do that. And here's debriefing for instead of from. That's interesting. Inconsistency, duplication. So I was copy pasting this as I was building out this package. And I thought to myself all along, really shouldn't do it like this. Really should have a function to do it for you. And that came to the fore. And the reason we did it was because we started to put in our cards these strings. And so now my front-end developer is doing the same thing, quote, space, for, space, single quote, or from. And we just decided this has gotten out of hand. We need to refactor and avoid this kind of redundancy. So let's see what we did. So let's look for review title. Let's look for project review title. Okay. So what I'm going to start with is the solution that our consultant came up with. Her name is Bernadette. She's a really excellent developer. We've been having great fun working on these projects together. And this is what she came up with for project review title. So you pass in the project review ID, you get the information about that project review type from the project review. So there's the name is the action, the milestone name. And then if it's for preparation, it's X for the milestone, prepare for the milestone. If it's debriefing, it's debrief from the milestone. If it's the assessment, it's simply assess project. So this is what she came up with as a single function implementation to do what I asked, which is not hard code these formulas. And it looks good. She did a nice job. And we can call this inside the function, inside the query that drives those cards. And then we don't have to hard code it. In fact, let's take a look. If I go to my home page, my projects, and here we have where is it calling it? We haven't changed it in the code yet. So it's still calling, it's still doing the case. This is exactly what we want to get away from. So this will be replaced with the function call. Now, this is interesting. So she built the function essentially according to the specs that I provided. You got a project review ID, get the appropriate information, construct. But if you look at this call right here, notice it does not use the project review type ID, project review ID. Instead, it's using the information directly, the review name, the milestone name, the review type. And this leads, in fact, to the refactoring that we then looked at. So in general, when somebody says build a piece of code to do X and you do something like this, then the question becomes, how is it going to be used? And if the only place it's going to be used is by passing in that key to the table, this is great. But remember that conversation I had last Feuertip or two ago about deterministic functions and segregating out deterministic logic from non-deterministic logic? Well, here we go. Here's an example of that. So this single function combines deterministic and non-deterministic logic for production or generation or creation of the project review title. Here's the non-deterministic part. Here's the deterministic part. And the fact that she hasn't separated them means that if we kept it with the single overloading, we would have to go into this thing and replace this with in-track util, project review title, and then PRI, project review ID. Now, and that would replace the case statement. And that's okay. It would be no big deal to do that. The problem, however, is that I've already queried up this information. And now I'm going to query it up again. Now you could say to yourself, in fact, I could say for this application, it's not like we're going to be dealing with millions of projects, millions of project reviews. It actually probably won't matter. We could literally do the same work again, fine. But it's not ideal. And also what it speaks to is the fact that there are different use cases for this particular functionality, getting the title for a review. So I think what makes more sense, so let's get rid of this one. So I think this is an example where we want to take that single function and break it apart. So let's take a look at what I did. So now we have all the way up here, we have 3 different project review title functions. 1, 2, 3. Now the one that she originally wrote is now rebuilt as follows. Do the non-deterministic part, and then call the deterministic one. So now I'm passing in the values that I already have. And this version is what can be called from here. So I can now say, instead of this, I want to pass in these 2 pieces of information. And I can literally just take the values here like that and replace this. So now I've got the same API, the same call to the project review title function, but I've now created an overloading that can be used specifically for this kind of situation. I'm not going to save that right now. And what's even more interesting, so that's deterministic, non-deterministic. And that's this one right here. This is the deterministic one. And look, let's call it deterministic, shall we? Yes, we should, Stephen. So that's deterministic. And then I have a third variation. So that's the breakout of the deterministic and non-deterministic. But then I started looking through all the places where this was being used in my code. So preparation for, from, let's keep looking. And here we go. Now here's a case where I've got a case statement buried inside one of these calls. And what it turned out is that not only were these 2 overloadings, the deterministic and non-deterministic, useful, but also in some cases I had the milestone name and the project review type ID. And I wanted to, instead of having a case expression in multiple places calling project review title multiple times, what I did was take that case and move it inside my function. So in the end, if I look for all the places where this is being called now, do it? Yes. So here we go. So here's the project review title with all the specific names already set and passed in. Here's my approach. Now here's the skip to. We had a case statement here. So my first pass at using this one was putting project review title inside the case. So I started using my 2 different overloadings, and I had multiple calls. Sorry, this is when X, then. And I was finding myself doing multiple calls to project review title within a single case expression. So then I went ahead and made my other third overloading that supported that particular API. So in the end, Yes, yes, yes. In the end, I had 3 different overloadings from my original. The top level one that assumes you haven't queried anything yet. You've just got the project review ID, do the non-deterministic work. Then I've got this other approach, which basically says, I've got the project review type ID. I don't want to have my own case expression called multiple times. Just take care of it inside here. And this as well is deterministic, right? Because it's simply doing a pass through and doing a case expression on other values. I guess it's not truly deterministic because these are globals, but they're set when the package is initialized. So they are deterministic in that case, in that context. So now we have this nicely elaborated API that started with a simple single function. We could have gotten away with that, but this is so much better. All right, so that's the one example of refactoring. Why don't we take a break, stop sharing, see if we got any comments.
Yeah, Rachel found that very helpful.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Yeah, and it's very much an incremental process. So again, Bernadette did the first implementation, which would have been fine to go with as it is. Then I realized I've got all these places where I have the strings already. So then I did this one overloading. And then when I started to apply that, I realized this doesn't make sense, calling it multiple times in a single expression. Why no DBMS assert? So DBMS assert would certainly be relevant if I was doing dynamic SQL, but I'm not doing any dynamic SQL here. So DBMS assert is basically make sure that was it through an LOV? I'm not sure what you're asking, Rachel, so keep going. She was just mentioning, was it through an LOV? So I think maybe what you're wondering about, Rachel, right, for the parameters of the function, right? So if I'm passing in values directly from users, they could choose different values. Okay, let me share my screen again. These are excellent points. So go ahead and share my screen, thanks. So when you have something like this overloading right here, where you're passing in the strings directly, I don't think it's a situation for DBMS assert, because again, there's no dynamic SQL. DBMS assert will validate that you've got a good table name or a good schema name and so on, or doesn't have any bad characters in it. But you're right that this assumes that you've got valid values coming in, and yes, so the user would never be allowed to just enter milestone names or names and names as actions themselves. Good points. Good points to keep in mind. What else do we have? Okay.
That's
all right.
now.
So that's one example. I want to show you one more. It's sort of a variation on the same thing, and then we'll sum up for the day. So if you could share my screen, that'd be great. And now I'm going to go to the current production version of IntrackUtil. And let's see, go down to the bottom of that. Well, then we have another exercise, which is finalize review. Okay, so version 1, right? So here's the current implementation that Bernadette wrote for me. So in this case, in Intrack, we have the concept of a project review. So I'm going to go into my Intrack application. We're in the midst of debriefing. So complete debriefing from the project. And you finalize a review, but when you finalize a review, you have to have a whole lot of stuff set. Well, what if people are in a hurry? We don't want this application to bog them down. So we want to let them say, okay, we're going to hide it away, but you can skip validations and force the finalization of this review, in which case we'll copy information from the last review and just let you get on with your job. So that's the idea there. So Bernadette wrote a finalized review procedure that takes in the values that will provide for the force if they're present. If we're forcing, we're going to get the last project review. We're going to get the information for that review. If the current status has not been set, if they've got a value here that they want to save, we're going to use it. But if there's nothing there, we're going to grab it from the previous review. So if the current status is null, get the review from the last, get the status from the last review. Same thing for client satisfaction, confidence level. And then in my update statement, again, if I am forcing, then I set these values. If I'm not forcing, then I simply say the review ended on and it was approved. In other words, we only got this far if we're not forcing because it's ready to be saved. So this was the first pass implementation, and I think it's good. it's correct in that it will do the job as needed. There were a couple of things that came to my mind, and I'd ask you for your thoughts on it, but it's getting late in the half hour and it's a lot of code to look at. But here's what I noticed. First of all, a lot of this is unnecessary. We don't need to declare all these variables. We don't need to, in fact, I think we can get away with almost every single one of these variables going away. So let's look at the most concise version, which is right here. So now what I'm going to do is say, if I'm forcing get the last project review information, I just call the function right inside my select statement, whereas before I put it into a local variable, then use that variable here. And also, I don't need any of these local variables for set current status. I can take each of those case expressions and I can move them directly inside the update statement. Right? If the client satisfaction level is null, then just use the last one. So I didn't need all those intermediate variables. Now, this is a more concise approach. I'm going to show you an even more compact version in just a moment, or at least something that addresses a different issue I've got. So this is more compact. We don't have all those local variables. We don't have all these separate assignments. And then we do the update. So
Stephen, sorry to interrupt. There's a few comments about the screen being hard to read and that it's blurry. So there might be some StreamYard issues, who knows, but if you can
make the font bigger.
If you can make your
I didn't make it as big as I usually do because I was showing more code than I usually do. So let's go for it. Can't make it too much bigger. Hopefully that's better. Okay. Let me know if we need to do more.
Another thing I can do is I can make it.
It looks good on the screen. Like okay. So I made it more compact. Now the downside of this approach is if I want to do some tracing, debugging, something's not going well, why are these values not being set properly? By embedding all of the logic internally in the statements, I can't see those values. So I like this approach because I can now put in trace. For example, if I've got Insum debug or logger, I can say Insum debug, message, L confidence level. That sort of thing. You can't do that if it's all embedded into the single update statement. So there's an advantage to taking this approach, and you can decide which you want to take. It may be that you take this approach until the code's stabilized, then compactify it, but that probably doesn't make a lot of sense either. Anyway, that would be the trade-off between these two different approaches: verbose but traceable, nice and compact, but harder to do your debugging, interim debugging. Now, the other thing that bugs me about this code, even this more concise version, is redundancy. I've got an update here, and I've got another update here. Or to go back to the original, I've got two different updates, here and here. I don't like that. I think this should just be one update statement as opposed to having a fork with updates, partly because even though these are right next to each other now, over time, the things that might get more complex. There's more code here, and it gets pushed down. You don't even remember that there are two different updates. You change one, you forget to change the other. I hate that. So here's the other approach I took. So it's kind of like an intermediate state. I've got local variables. Well, I don't have local variables, right? Here's a nice little trick to keep in mind. I've got a whole record that I'm filling right here, and I'm using that record, the record fields in my case expressions, whether they're separate assignments or they are integrated into the update statement. Either way, I'm using those fields. But remember, this is a variable. So in my third iteration, what I'm going to do is have a single update and stop highlighting. Okay. So I get my latest review information, and then I'm going to override the latest review information with my current status if it's available. So if the current status is null, keep it the way it is. Else, in fact, this should be, if current status is not null, I guess it's got to be the same. Okay, so if it's null, keep it the way it is. Otherwise, use the current one. Same thing for client satisfaction and confidence level. So I don't have to declare new variables. I can use the fields in my record. Nice. And then I can go down here and have a single update. So here's what I wanted to show you. Previously, my two different updates were determining which columns would be updated. Here's just these two. But if I'm doing a force, I want to set these. Okay, but I can do that as follows. I'm going to update all 5 of those columns every time. And if I'm forcing, I might override those columns. But if I'm not forcing, I'll just set them to what they currently are. So I end up with a single update statement. I do separate assignments, but I reuse my fields so I don't have to declare new variables. So this is a nice combination of conciseness and avoiding redundancy around DML. And to me, avoiding redundancy in DML is going to be way more important than some additional verbosity, let's say, in the assignments there. And that is the end of my cruising through my different code work that I did in nulls. You can also reuse the attributes of the last project review record and only set them to parameter values if the parameter values are not null, preserving the logging capability. Right, that's what I did. Is that, yes, okay. I guess did Niels put that in before I showed the third iteration? I can't tell.
Exactly, Stephen, it's sometimes a little hard with the delay to know exactly when he saw it come up. So that's possible. And sorry, everyone, about the image quality. You seem to be having issues with the image quality. It's looking okay on my end. So, but we'll definitely take a look and see if there's anything we need to adjust. No, that is not what we're saying.
We can't blame the customer? Oh, wait a minute. Huh. So what you have just done, but wouldn't it be better to remove the is null? Let's go back to that. Maybe so what I did here is null, remove is null. So when current status is null, set to current. So what do you think it would be instead? You wouldn't be better to remove the is null. So it would just be, what would I be assigning it to? Not current status. I'm being thick, Nils. I'm not sure what you want me to change it to. So, and Rachel says, why not put it all into the update to make the logic more clear? Put all of this into the update here. In other words, we don't need to do any of this. Maybe. Let's see. So now the suggestion is, why do we need that whole
These conversations conversations which can be tricky. Next time we'll publish a link and have people come in. Code review is fun, yeah. And Niels has come back with his. So Rachel says, put the case in the update.
I mean, only do the assignment if p current status is not null, right? So in other words, I think what you're saying is I could say, if p current status is not null, then override.
So just to clarify, you're now dealing with Niels's comment, not Rachel's, about putting the case in the update.
That's right. And what I want to do is reformat, but I think I've probably made it somewhat of a mess of things. Yeah, because I've got partially commented and uncommented code. Who knows? Okay, so yeah, so we could say if not null, if status is not null, then set. So instead of having
Stephen, you should have Niels on for a live code refactoring. I think that'd be a fun session.
I have previously invited Niels. Maybe he'll want to take me up on the offer in the future.
Oh, okay.
So right, so we could do a series of ifs instead of the cases. Those do look simpler, and it's more clear that we're only making a change if it's not null. I like that, Niels. I think that's better. And then Rachel is saying, don't do any of that. You could just do it right inside here. And yeah, I guess so. So I think what we're saying is this could just be a single update statement. I think that's what we're saying. Well, that's what Rachel is saying. I think so. All right. Thank you. You've simplified my code even more. And now it's 11:30.
Awesome. Hey, quickly, before we move on, I just want to say it's conference season. We've got our first case scope in 3 years next week. So if any of you who are watching will be at Kscope, we'll be there. We're Apex Track sponsors. Come by and say hi, booth 120. We've got 4 presenters. We've got Plamin, Haniel, Anton, Adrian will be presenting, and everybody looking forward to it. So definitely come by and say hi. And if you haven't registered and you're still thinking of going, please use Insum code. Let me just put it in the chat into the here.
Give us some cred.
And you'll get, oh, Mark, tell me if this is the right code. I believe it is. You'll get $100 off your registration.
Looks pretty good.
So that's.
All right, so to finish up, folks, 2 things. We're going to make a donation to the Red Cross for Ukraine humanitarian support as Putin's war of destruction rages on. And of course, we are increasingly distracted by all the other crises of the world. So hopefully the Ukrainians can keep fighting and keep getting the weapons they need to push back. And for our cultural artifact of the week, I've invited Mark, who's our behind the scenes event manager and designer and so on, to come on and share a book with us. Mark, join us.
That's what happens when you got 2 people with their fingers on the control. I'm not touching anything.
Thanks for having me on. I know we're running out of time here, but the cultural artifact I wanted to present is a book. It's actually a play in 4 acts. Can you see this? It's called The Crucible by Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller is a well-known American playwright and writer, and he was best known for Death of a Salesman and having married Marilyn Monroe for 2 years, being married to Marilyn Monroe for 2 years. Anyway, this story is based on the Salem witch trials of 1692, in which 4 girls were accused of witchcraft activities. And it ended up during that trial that over 200 people got accused, and some 30 people were imprisoned, and 19 were actually put to death because the girls in turn accused other people. And because we were talking about witchcraft and sorcery, there was no real proof. And there was also a bunch of family disputes. A big lie. A lot of people were bringing their family feuds into it, and so kind of making kind of accusations of people they didn't like and stuff like that. Obviously, this is a fictionalized account, but it's really an excellent play. I got the chance to actually see it in person. It's stunning because Arthur Miller's writing is extremely tight, very economical. It keeps you on the edge of your seat all the way through. And this story, he actually wrote it because it was written in 1953, and that was during the McCarthy years, where Joseph McCarthy, a senator from Wisconsin, decided to try to find all the communists inside the Senate,
State Department,
and right in the American government, essentially, and root them out, because the big fear at that time was like if communists were in and around America and influencing people, that would be the destruction of democracy and everything. So you have this
Facebook instead of that.
Pardon me?
Turns out that Facebook will be the destruction of democracy, not communists.
Well, yeah, see, there's a lot of levels to this, and that's what's fun about this play, is that you basically have like a couple of good ingredients, which are fear, manipulation of justice to achieve ends, and lies. So this book is actually very up to date, and if you could look around you, and it's something that keeps recurring. For example, in the Philippines, President Duterte, his claim the way he got elected was, I'm going to kill all the drug lords, all the drug leaders, all the drug dealers, and he set out to do that, and people elected him, and it was great, except that there are a lot of extrajudicial killings that are going on as well. So were all those people actually drug dealers? So you see, like, it's when there's enough fear, people will put power into the hands of people who manipulate, and that can, anyway, it gets you to think about all that stuff, and it's a great book.
Very, very topical. Unfortunately, I'd love it that it wasn't. Thanks. All right, so check out The Crucible. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the stories I told about code and evolving code over time, sometimes very short amounts of time. And if you are interested in joining, and also 2 weeks from today, Monica Lewandowski who's an Oracle database developer based in Poland, I believe, will be on the show talking about how she likes to organize and segregate out her code, her overall PL SQL and backend code. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you ever have any interest in providing a tip, sharing a tip from your own experience, it doesn't have to be some major new idea that nobody's ever thought of before, just something that you found helpful you want to pass on to others, do get in touch with me. I'd be happy to have you on. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Stay masked. Don't give in to COVID. It's not inevitable that you will get it. See you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.